Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Can you hear okay on Zoom?
Yeah, it's getting better if you speak in the mic.
Okay. So we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 9, the passing away of Bhishma Dev in the presence of Lord Krishna. And yesterday, Leelananda Prabhu read the first verse. Today we will read the second and third. So I'll read the Sanskrit of the second, and then we'll move on to the third. Tadate Vrattara Sarve Saddasvai Svarna Bhushtitai Anvagachandra Ter Vipra Vyasadom Yadayastata. Translation. At that time, all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots drawn by first-class horses decorated with gold ornaments. With them were Vyas and rishis like Domya, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others. Maybe I'll just pause there for a second. I'll come back to that. I just want to mention a little bit about Domya. Text number 3. Do you have the verse on your phone or something? This is Canto 1, Chapter 9, text number 3. Rattena Sadananjaya Sater Vyarochata Dripa Kuvera Iva Guyakai Bhagavan Api Viprarshe Ratena Sadananjaya Satervya Rochata Nripa Kuvera Iva Guyakai Bhagavan Api Viprarshe Ratena Sadananjaya Satervya Rochata Nripa Kuvera Iva Guyakai Ratena Sadananjaya Satervya Rochata Nripa Kuvera Iva Guyakai Bhagavan Api Viprarshe Ratena Sadananjaya Satervya Rochata Nripa Kuvera Iva Guyakai. On Zoom.
Bhagavan Api Viprarshe Ratana Sadananjaya Sater Vyarochitan Ripaha Kavera Iva Guyakai
Antiviprase Ratena Sadananjaya Satervyarokchata Nripaha Kuvera Iva Guyakai
Bhagavan Api Viprase Ratena Sadananjaya Satir Svayarochata Nripaha Kuvera Iva Yakai
Bhagavan api viprarse ratne nasa dhananjaya sate vyarochatan kuvera iva guhyai kahe.
Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Api, also, Vipra Rishi, who sage among the Brahmanas. Ratena, on the chariot, Sad Dhananjaya, with Dhananjaya, Arjuna, Saha, he, Tai, by them, Vyarochata, appeared to be highly aristocratic. Nripaha, the king, Yudhisthira. Kuvera, the treasure of the demigods. Iba, as Guyakai, companions known as Guyakas. Translation: O sage amongst the Brahmanas, Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus, King Yudhisthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Guyakas. Please repeat, O sage among the Brahmanas, Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus, King Yudhisthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Guyakas. Purport: Lord Sri Krishna wanted the Pandavas to be present before Bhishma Dev in the most aristocratic order, so that he might be pleased to see them happy at the time of his death. Kuvera is the richest of all demigods, and herein King Yudhisthira appeared like him, Kuvera. For the procession along with Sri Krishna was quite appropriate for the royalty of King Yudhisthira. Om Jnana Tamanandasya Taranjana Shlokaya Chakshur Unmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Nobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swami Vipakadamayam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaditam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishatam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopitam Radha Krishna Sudha Apta Kanchana Goram Hi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpatarupascha Kripa Sindhu Devash Patitanam Pavani Deva Vaishnavi Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here in this chapter, after the Battle of Kurukshetra has taken place, King Yudhisthira is lamenting because of all of the death that he feels that has taken place on his account, and he's struggling with the grief of many of the slain were personalities who were very dear to him. And also as a king, he was aggrieved because he felt that the king's duty is to actually protect and hear on his behalf so many had been slain in battle. And in his grief, he's not able to be counseled by anybody to find any relief, even by Lord Krishna himself, who's personally present, because, as Prabhupada states here, that Lord Krishna wanted King Yudhisthira to go before Bhishma Dev, who was still present on the Battle of Kurukshetra, having not left his body yet, still lying on the bed of arrows, waiting for the appropriate time for his death, like a great yogi. He's there. And Lord Krishna knew that he would be able to please Bhishma Dev by bringing the Pandavas before him in all of their glory after the battle. So accompanying them himself and also accompanied by great sages. Krishna goes because he wants to soothe the heart of his great devotee Bhishma Dev as well as Yudhisthira. But in this case, he also wants Yudhisthira to hear from Bhishma Dev some great instructions that he will speak. This is another way that Lord Krishna is making arrangements for his devotees to be glorified. And amongst the crowd are very, very exalted people. Even Srila Vyasadeva himself is present. Just imagine the assembly of people that were there at that time. I was going to mention about Domya. Domya was the priest of the Pandavas who lived with the Pandavas as they were living in the forest. Domya was accompanying them and served them as their priest. And I always remember one pastime, because in the Mahabharata, I don't remember reading a lot about Domya, but there was one incident where I think it was Jayadratha who was on his way to his own wedding. I think it was his own wedding, actually. And he happened to pass by the cottage or the area where the Pandavas were living. And Pandavas at that time were out doing something, and Draupadi and Domya were left behind, taking care of whatever needed to be taken care of at their home, which was a very simple place. And so, as Jayadratha, someone can correct me if I have the name on it, I think this is Jayadratha, he was passing by and he happened to see Draupadi. And then he was so struck by her beauty that he forgot about where he was going. I'm quite sure it was his own wedding. He was going to a wedding, I think it was his own. But when he saw Draupadi's beauty, he just could not control his mind, and he decided he wanted to possess Draupadi. So he went to he headed towards her and said so many things to her, trying to win her, and she was, of course, completely insulted that a man would approach her in this way, and he warned him that he was putting himself at great risk by doing so. And Jayadratha was not very intelligent and decided to kidnap Draupadi and take her for himself. So he captures Draupadi, takes her on his chariot, and as they're driving away, Domya, the priest, was completely infuriated that this was going on. And so he, even though he wasn't a Kshatriya, pursued Jayadratha along the chariot and just continuously chastised him for being such an idiot. He would just, one thing after another, Domya was chastising him, telling him how foolish he was, and etc. And so it was quite a courageous sage, and the Pandavas were only a short distance away, and they learned very quickly that Draupadi was taken by Jayadratha, and course, he was captured, to make a long story short, and he was punished. His life was not taken. He was spared by King Yudhisthira. And so then Jayadratha went, because he was quite humiliated the way he was punished. He went to do some austerity to please, it was Lord Shiva, and he got the benediction that he could defeat the Pandavas only once. He wanted to kill them, but that wasn't possible, so he was granted the ability to defeat the Pandavas in battle one time only. And it was that one time only that led to Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu, being, they had, when they broke open the Chaturvyuha, the formation on the battlefield headed by Abhimanyu, the plan was for all the Pandavas to follow him in, but Jayadratha had this boon, so he stood before the Pandavas. And Arjuna was at another place in the battlefield, and the Pandavas were unable to accompany Abhimanyu into the Chaturvyuha, into the military formation, and then that great epic battle takes place where Abhimanyu is so powerful that the Kauravas have to use unfair means to defeat him. But so anyway, all of that, just a little memory from the Mahabharata. But I was thinking about Domya, who was actually the priest of the Pandavas, who was very, very courageous as well, and loved the Pandavas very much. He was there, Vyas was there, Lord Krishna was there, and so many great personalities that King Yudhisthira is compared to Kuvera, surrounded by his many great companions. So here, Yudhisthira is being exalted. He is, and this is by the design of Krishna, that here he is now here he is now assembled with these great souls, and he is victorious, and he appears very opulent and powerful, even though he's very remorseful inside and pained about everything that's taken place. But nonetheless, the Lord is arranging for him to be in such an exalted position. I was listening to a devotee one time talk about who he felt was the hero of the Mahabharata. So perhaps there could be a discussion and people would have different conclusions or different ideas who they felt would be the hero, the main hero in the Mahabharata. And this devotee was making the case that it was actually Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira as the main protagonist hero, you could say. Now, there may be some debate about that, but I thought about this and I found myself to be in agreement, because Yudhisthira was somehow able to be so guided by his understanding of Dharma, not just mundane Dharma, but understanding he was so sensitive to the will of the Lord that his life as a leader could be directed in multiple different ways to fulfill the purposes of Krishna. Because if we recall, Krishna's purpose was to come and do this thing that Yudhisthira is so aggrieved about. It was Lord Brahma himself and all the host of demigods approached Lord Vishnu at the ocean of milk, asking for help because the earth was overrun by so many demonic forces and the earth was feeling quite overburdened. And so Vishnu revealed that he, in his original form of Krishna, would be appearing and would free the world of the burden of these demonic forces. So how does one become an instrument in such a great plan, like an elaborate and amazing scenario where the Lord comes and he wants to achieve all of these different things. And Yudhisthira himself was pivotal in, helping direct the will of the Lord. Sometimes Yudhisthira is criticized, for that, particularly this incident in of the gambling in the hall of the Kauravas is quite a bewildering and intense chapter of the Mahabharata. How is it that Yudhisthira could have become overcome by such impulsiveness to continue the gambling match with Duryodhana and Shakuni, and despite the fact that he even understood that Shakuni was cheating and he had no chance to win, yet he continued to play. He continued to play until he had lost his wealth, and in the form of gold, in the form of assets, in the form of army, in the form of animals, like one thing after another. It's like quite amazing chapter to read. It's quite a devastating chapter, actually, in the Mahabharata. And then when he's down to nothing else left to offer, he's thinking, in the gambling match, he's thinking, well, I can offer my brothers, because why? So how is it that Yudhisthira could be impelled to this line of action? All along in that situation when Yudhisthira was being abused in the gambling match by Shakuni and Duryodhana, all along Yudhisthira had a thought process that was the undercurrent of the moment for him, which was that he had to respond first of all to the invitation because he was a Kshatriya, and then in the situation of the Kauravas' hall were all of his teachers and seniors, all of the knowers of Dharma, including Bhishma Dev himself was present, Bhishma Dev the Mahajana, and many other great souls, of course, Dronacharya, all of the people who Yudhisthira considered to be his superiors and took shelter of within his mind. So as he was engaged in the gambling, he was thinking that he had to go forward because he was continuously being challenged, and the dharma of the Kshatriya is to never back down from the challenge. And if the challenge was unjust, if there was something that was adharmic happening, then certainly the knowers of Dharma who were present in the assembly would speak, and they would stop it. But because they were there sitting silently, and that silence was a sort of consent, then Yudhisthira felt himself helpless, then but to be impelled forward into this whole situation as it unfolded. If he were to offer something into the match, or if the whole situation itself was unjust or adharmic, then the knowers of Dharma from whom he took shelter in the room, he was depending on their guidance in that moment. And of course, Bhishma Dev, as it unfolds, as Yudhisthira loses one brother, then the next brother, then the next brother, then is left with Draupadi. Somehow or other it comes to his mind that, well, I can still offer Draupadi. And then Dushashan goes and he drags Draupadi out into the assembly. And all the while, there's Bhishma is there, Drona is there, all of the great members of the assembly are present, looking on, and their minds are so conflicted because they actually don't even Draupadi challenges them. She says, here you are, knowers of Dharma, and is it a fact that Yudhisthira could give up, could offer me when he had already given up himself. I can't remember the exact intricacies of the argument, but Draupadi was pointing out how this was completely wrong, even from a logical perspective, what to speak of Dharma. And nobody could understand what to do. And the tension was rising. And so all along, Yudhisthira was struck by the fact that nobody was objecting, nobody was rising to and to say that there was something that shouldn't be happening. And so he, in that moment, was surrendered to his superiors and trusting that even though the situation was very difficult, things were happening according to, in some kind of guided way, because after all, the guides were present, if this makes sense. So as Yudhisthira was sitting there, going through all of this, the bewildering thing was that if this is wrong, then why aren't the people who know what is wrong saying something to correct it? Because they're not doing that, then, I must continue. So, and the result, although quite painful, was that Draupadi was insulted in that way, and of course Draupadi was born for that purpose, not necessarily to be insulted exactly in that way, but to be the downfall of the Kshatriyas. And this arrangement transpired in such a way that so that she could be avenged. This was practically like a line that was crossed that could never be repaired after they insulted Draupadi, and so that set forth for certain the battle of Kurukshetra, that the Lord Krishna actually desired to take place. So if we can imagine King Yudhisthira as a hero here in this whole situation, he is surrendered himself to a degree that's quite astonishing. His faith in his superiors, not just faith in a hierarchy, but faith in people whom he knew to know Dharma, and so to be guided by Krishna. So he always thought of Krishna somehow being part of the arrangement. Even though this very difficult situation is unfolding, Krishna is somehow at work here. If I can follow the thread of what I'm meant to do, then it will be pleasing to Krishna, and Krishna's will unfold. But to be that kind of an instrument for Krishna was quite painful. To be, and so therefore, Yudhisthira is a hero. He was able to surrender his life in a way that was personally painful, but it was for the will of the Lord. So this is a real hero, someone who can set aside their personal desires, their personal aspirations, their personal happiness for the sake of the happiness of Lord Krishna. And that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing for any of us to do in the current age either. It's not easy for us to just take all of our desires that we've accumulated since time immemorial and just set them aside and just be a pure devotee and just be the instrument of Krishna. This is not something that comes very easily at all. And so that is the context of the true hero. If one can rise to that occasion. So, we're asked, by Srila Prabhupada, by our acharyas, we're asked to live a heroic life. Yeah, that's the path here, Bhakti Yoga, our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. We're asked to rise to the occasion and to live a heroic life. where we can do something like Yudhisthira. I mean, not perhaps to that scale, but something where we can actually set aside ourselves and become sensitive enough to the will of the Lord, to put His priority, His plan for our own, for the service and the betterment of the world and for others. That is very difficult path, and it is to be celebrated, especially when it is achieved. And here in this scenario, it's been achieved. Here's what success looks like. Of course, this is success in the context of the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriya, the world of the Kshatriyas is an unknown thing in today's age, but all of the heroism, all of the courage, all of the brutality, all of the paraphernalia, and the scenarios that are a consequence of the presence of Kshatriyas, all of that, is something that we read in the Mahabharata, or something that we read from past ages. But if we take out the background, we take the principle and put it into the context of today, we may not be marching out on the battlefield of Kurukshetra or have to go through all the things that Yudhisthira did, but the path is the same. To somehow sacrifice our lives, so that we can be instrumental in the fulfillment of the Lord's desire. And so if that can be accomplished, then, then everyone is pleased. Our lives are successful, and we know the path of the hero. What more exciting or exalted thing could we aspire for than living the life of a hero for Krishna? Can we be the hero? Can we be that person in our own way, in our own world, in our own path? That is there for us. We have the opportunity to step into that identity of being Krishna's devotee and being that, and executing that heroism in the face of the current Kali Yuga, in the face of our own bewilderment, of our own forgetfulness of the Lord, the courage to actually face it and to rise to the occasion, and to it's quite magnificent and powerful to think about what the path of Bhakti Yoga actually is. Sometimes we may get into a routine, which is also necessary. We get into our routine of doing our seva and doing our activities in Krishna consciousness, and we may forget about the magnificence about what we're being ushered towards here. The ultimate, success and most heroic path, to be the devotee of the Lord. So that is what the position of Yudhisthira is, and he is now going to arrive at the feet of Bhishma Dev on the battlefield in all of his glory, seeing Yudhisthira being so successful, and being that successful hero is actually what Bhishma Dev always wanted. So he'll be very pleased. And also Yudhisthira will be very pleased because his heart will be soothed by the great words of another hero. And his grief will dissipate by the mercy of the Lord. So I will stop there. It's 8:45. Thank you very much for being present in person and online as well. Anything that you'd like to say or mention or question? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's so nice to be around. We have our heroes, we have our heroes in Krishna consciousness for sure. Like our guru, for sure. And there's many other heroes also, great personalities that we look up to so much. So we're quite fortunate to have these true heroes, true heroes. Anybody on Zoom would like to say something?
Hare Krishna, pranams to all. Thank you for sharing so many details and background story in the Mahabharata. I'm thinking about Bhishma Pita. Of course, we all know he's a Mahajana, and there are people that would sort of fault him for remaining silent, as you said in that Raj Sabha, where all these injustices were taking place, right down to the atrocious act of trying to insult Draupadi. But on the other hand, Bhishma Pita had this vow that he took that in no way would he oppose whoever it was that would sit on that throne of Hastinapur, that he had made that vow to his father and his stepmother. But it was so wonderful because these pure devotees, no matter what they're doing, it's always instructional for all of us. That's the reason why all these pastimes where pure devotees may seem to be doing something that may look sort of negative in the grand scheme of things, but whatever they're doing, it's always an instruction for us, because on that battlefield, Krishna Pita, he glorified Krishna in the sense he challenged Krishna to break his vow, whereas Krishnadev's entire life was sort of conducted against all kinds of difficulties and injustices that took place to uphold his vow. So here he is showing how glorious Krishna is, that he doesn't care about any vows he may have made if it comes to the protection of his devotee. He will break vows. So we can see this beautiful pastime that's taking place. Bhishma Pita there upholding the vow, whereas Krishna is ready to break the vow. And in the TV dramatization, I don't know if this actually did take place or not, but I thought it was very wonderful because at one point there was a conversation Bhishma Dev was having with Krishna, and Bhishma Dev lamented that it's because of this vow that he took. He had to remain silent on so many things, whereas he really didn't want to. He knew all of this was wrong, but because of that one vow he made, it sort of rendered him helpless, and he was just lamenting that I wish, all those unfortunate things that happened because of this vow I took, all of those unfortunate things were removed from my life. And Krishna said, well, if all those unfortunate things were removed from your life, how much of your life would you have lived? Because the majority of Bhishma Dev's adult life consisted of all these, injustices and all these things that he didn't want to be a part of that took place. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for that. I have a slightly different perspective on that. That, of course, you're right, that as a consequence of Bhishma Dev staying true to his, his vow to protect the throne, he had to be subjected to being on the other side and lost everything, apparently, in terms of the war. But that moment in the assembly where Draupadi was present and Bhishma Dev was silent, another possible perspective here is that because Bhishma Dev, he did regularly chastise Duryodhan and his father, his name just escaped my memory.
Dhritarashtra.
Dhritarashtra, yeah. Dhritarashtra Uvacha, first line of the Bhagavad Gita. I was looking to find the name. But Dhritarashtra, he would actually regularly chastise them for this path of insisting on war with the Pandavas, even on the battlefield. Bhishma Dev repeatedly warned and reminded Duryodhana that he had already told him that the Pandavas were undefeatable. So it's not like Bhishma Dev couldn't check, or at least attempt to check or chastise the king or Duryodhana. But I think in that situation, he was genuinely, because in the seventh canto, there's this remarkable verse by Dharmaraj himself about how Dharma is so very difficult to understand. In fact, that's the verse where the Mahajans are listed. These are the people that understand. Of course, Bhishma Dev is listed, but that doesn't mean that it's always easy, even for a Mahajan, to understand exactly what Krishna's will is in terms of the Dharma that's being played out. Because after all, Yudhisthira himself was a manifestation of Dharmaraj in the court during that time. And so, like, it seemed either by Krishna's arrangement or by the complexity of the situation that Bhishma Dev was genuinely bewildered and didn't actually know how to respond in that situation. That's my defense of Bhishma Dev. Leelananda, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Please give the mic.
Since you're asking me, I was not really going to speak, but okay, me and more. Did you see this movie, 300? Yeah. This is Sparta. This is my mood that I would have, instead of accepting the challenge to gamble, I would have, they can suggest a counter challenge. I would have said, okay, let's go to war right now instead, right here, right now, instead of going to this completely bizarre exercise of gambling. And just imagine how Draupadi must have felt being gambled away. Come on, guys, what is going on here? It is just completely absurd scene. And you were asked, I thought you would be going around earlier saying, asking people, who is, according to you, who is the hero of this? I would have said, well, actually, there's no hero, but a heroine. In a sense, yeah, you could say, because a woman's place is not on the battlefield. So Draupadi, in absentia, she's the heroine, because it was fought for her to establish her dignity. And sometimes men, they're boastful, they're strong, and they do stupid things. And they need a woman to be there to, a woman is known most of the time to be too much on the emotional platform. But when the time is very crucial, one is very, very important, then she's the one presenting good advice to the man, which is very surprising. Like, case in point, when there was the conquest of the West, the great wild West, America, the history of America, they had those chariot, wagon, right? The wagon trail, and people, they would get stuck sometime. The wagon would get stuck with heavy, so the man would exert all their strength to try to push, and then he would die. And then he would die, but the woman, they would survive. They would survive the ordeal because they're not so rash into action more. In an important situation, then their rational mind kicks in. Then they can take the right decision. So that's why it's a good combination, men and women. As a couple, it's a good combination. The man is there for good connection. And in times of really important situation, the woman can have a cool head. Surprisingly enough, she can have a cool head instead of the man just going berserk. Like all of those men on the battlefield, they're all going berserk. berserk. But this gambling is really, really difficult for me to swallow. When it came to the disrobing of Draupadi, they should have just. I would have more respect for them. Actually, I would not have been able to just sit there. You understand? They should have just rebel against the whole thing and then go berserk there. Somehow, just jump on the guard and try to steal their weapon, and then, whatever they could, a chair, a cup, whatever, use everything available as a weapon and just fight at that moment. It's hard to understand the complexity of it.
I respect your case about the heroine. I think that's a worthy proposal. I'm not swayed by my own decision, but everything you said is quite profound. Yeah, like about her role as a heroine. Yeah, that's very. I knew it would be a contentious thing to say, right? To point out who the hero was. But yeah, good point about Draupadi being so important. Yes, I still maintain my claim, but that's okay. Maybe somebody else has their idea of who their hero is. Anyway, any other? Thank you, Leonardo Prabhu. That was nice. Anybody have something more on Zoom?
Just want to know, Draupadi asked the question when Dusasan goes, the messenger goes actually before, then she sends him back. Please find out whether Yudhishthira Maharaj lost himself first and then lose me, or he lost me and then he lost himself. Anybody knows about this? Who
Yes,
lost first?
I mentioned that.
No, but actually, did Yudhishthira Maharaj gamble himself first before Draupadi?
Well, you have to go back and read the Mahabharata and see, because everyone was quite bewildered by this question. So you have to kind of like read the Mahabharata and see what you think the right answer is to that. That was something that was unable to be answered, actually.
Okay,
and then eventually the tension broke because there was some omen that became quite suspicious of ill fortune, and Dhritarashtra, who had been more or less enjoying the situation, finally realized that that they were in danger because they had gone too far. And Dhritarashtra, not because of answering any legitimate question about Dharma, but he just called the whole thing off. And he gave the Pandavas back everything because he became fearful. So the questions were never actually answered. But if you would like to contemplate it, you go back and read the Bhagavad, or read the Mahabharata and see what the order of things was. But Draupadi made the argument about if she could have been gambled if Yudhisthira had lost himself first. And so she never got an answer. And the whole thing stopped because Dhritarashtra just panicked. He could see that they were doomed at some point. And so he thought, let's just give everything back, which was quite upsetting to Duryodhan and Shakuni. They thought that they had basically won, and now the king just handed everything back for nothing. But then afterwards, they convinced the king to allow them to have one more gambling match. And it was less dramatic, that one, but anyway. So yeah, do a little search in the Mahabharata and see if you can come up with an answer for that. It's very contentious chapter, right? It's very, very difficult, and all the subtleties are like, wow, there's so much going on there. It's like sometimes it's hard to read that chapter, but I think it's pretty awesome. Like, and that's why I think Judas is the hero. because the end result was exactly what Krishna wanted, like, and Yudhishthira was able to facilitate that. So, not that he wants it.
Hare Krishna, Nityanand.
Yes.
I'd like to add something, especially to the second part of the sloka. So does King Yudhishthira appear very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Gayakas, and Gayakas are like the treasurers of wealth. Yes, wealth.
Yes.
And so, like I'm an artist, as you know, and I don't want to push that much, but I just mentioned because for me, the wealth, it represents the color blue, which is very close to Krishna. And of course, there's so many shades of blue. So the wealth can be perceived differently in different shades. Like wealth, first we see wealth like material things. I have so much, brands, or then I have so many possessions, or houses, or so and so on. Then the wealth could be the knowledge, a little bit higher, right? Like I have so much knowledge that I understand the principles, and I can govern some as a governor, or or spiritual leader, and also there's a wealth, I think, in experience. It's kind of combine those two, and so that's another level of blue, and that's how I see it. The colors are kind of different ways of blue, and I think like Prabhupada probably, I don't know for sure, but that's how I see it. And one more thing I like to add it, because this scene is kind of like I kind of think about comparing with Lord Chaitanya, and when was kind of corresponding to Lord Chaitanya, and I can see that the moment with Haridas Thakur, when Haridas Thakur died, Lord Chaitanya was glorifying Haridas Thakur, and he pick him up, and he was dancing with him in ecstasy, right? So glorifying his basically him, his soul, his service. So that's. Do you see that that comparison? Or?
Well, I appreciate your, as an artist, appreciation of Krishna's color and its connection to wealth and opulence. Of course, that's why he is referred to as Bhagavan, the source of many things, including opulence. So that's nice. Thank you for sharing that, Prabhu. I'm not quite sure about the connection with Lord Chaitanya there, but I think we should wrap up here because it's now quite well after 9 o'clock. But I'll thank you for those comments, though. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Babu.